process. Just thank you for being here to make this difficult decision, and I just ask you to bless us as we go this time. We ask it all in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Carly, will you hit roll call, please?
Daniel Balls.
Here.
Harvey Bowman.
Here.
Rick Cochran. Robert Dennis. Lisa Ecke. Ann Harbison. Sharon, Joe Kleeklat. Roddy Lloyd. Tom Lundstrom. Eva Madison. Sue Madison. Joe Maxwell. Joe Patterson. Butch Pond. Bill Ussery.
Yes, I have some brief introductory comments as we have a couple of new members on the court, and I just wanted to explain how this goes. As you know, Washington County passed zoning in 2006 and then expanded it to the full county in 2007 with a base zoning of agricultural and single-family residential uses allowed by right. Any other use may petition and ask for what we call a conditional use permit. And it goes to the county planning board, and then the county planning board's decision must be ratified by the quorum court. The quorum court also acts as the board of appeals for those conditional use permits, which is what is happening tonight. The neighbors disagreed with the county planning board's approval of the White River Landing conditional use permit. And so they have appealed the decision and are asking you to review it in full. As a reminder, you know, our zoning is based on compatibility. And compatibility means able to coexist in harmony. It does not mean identical uses. It does not mean that it has to be completely the same. That is why the conditional use permit process was allowed. So as you review this, I'd like you to keep that in mind, that compatibility means to act in harmony with the other uses, and that is completely at your subjection. So if you guys have any questions about code or policy, please let me know. I'm going to let Nathan take over as this is his project, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Courtney. Nathan?
Thank you, everyone. Well, I'll just go ahead and get started. White River Landing CUP appeal. This conditional use permit request is located east of Greenland. It's located inside Greenland's planning area off Schaefer Road, Washington County Road number 69. The proposed CUP location is shown here outlined in magenta. It is situated on the east bank of the West Fork of the White River with a Crouch Branch tributary running to the river along the southern border of the property. The property has approximately 15% of floodplain coverage on the west end where it meets the river. Matt Mihailovich, the trails coordinator for the city of Fayetteville, sent in this NWA bike ped plan at the request of one of the neighbors. He wrote, quote, "The Northwest Arkansas Bike Ped Plan has identified Schaefer Road as a gravel bike route, also known as a gravel grinder. In addition, a shared use paved trail is planned along the White River." The applicant had the property surveyed to establish the relationship of the property with the river's bank, the building's relationship with the property line, and to verify site distance in both directions. Based on this survey, site distance appears adequate. Initially, planning staff, as well as the county contract engineer and county road department superintendent, had concerns about Schaefer Road's ability to carry the volume of traffic the proposal calls for. Concerns were regarding drainage, subgrade, width, ability of the road to support the increase in traffic, private utilities and ditches, relocation of those utilities, lack of right-of-way, safety, and whether the road should be widened or paved up to the project site. Based on these concerns, planning staff required the applicant to provide a full traffic study. This site plan shows how the fire lane, parking, and other site elements are proposed to be configured. The fire lane is shown to be a minimum of 24 feet wide with turning radii no less than 38 feet. 51 parking spaces are shown, plus 3 ADA accessible parking spaces at the front of the building, and 6 overflow parking spaces east of the pond, for a total of 60 parking spaces. Many outdoor side elements are proposed within close proximity to the northern property line, which is approximately 12 feet from the northwestern corner of the proposed building expansion area. Outdoor side elements, shown here in red, include an outdoor grilling area, smoking area, outdoor volleyball, horseshoes, and an outdoor covered porch on 2 sides of the building. In the applicant's letter of explanation, they mentioned they also intend to build meandering footpaths down to the river's edge. These paths are not shown on the site plan, though it should be noted that any grading or structures built within the floodplain area will require a floodplain permit prior to that construction. The applicant has conducted a precedent search, provided photos of other wedding venues they feel best represent their intentions with this proposal. I'm including the photos in this presentation at their request. Here are a couple more photos from the applicant's precedent search. This property and its associated structures exhibit a rural character not unlike the surrounding properties. There's an A-frame home on the property, which is of an endemic or native local style. However, it should be noted that the existing A-frame home on the property is not involved with this CUP request. This metal building shown here is constructed of the materials commonly found in typical agricultural settings in the area, and according to the applicants, the proposed improvements will appear rustic in nature. While the structure is proposed to exhibit a rural character, the proximity of the event center and associated parking area is very close to the neighboring property lines to the north and the east. The configuration of the property and the applicant's desire to utilize the existing metal building on site do not allow for the use to have any large separation from the surrounding properties. Planning staff iterated to the applicant that there was a potential for the close proximity of the proposal to neighboring properties to cause an issue with compatibility, and urged the applicant to try and mitigate some of the compatibility concerns. The applicant reached out to neighbors multiple times, but there are neighbors still in opposition to this project. And based on their concerns, staff asked the applicant to propose additional site plan additions or alterations to help mitigate the impact on surrounding neighbors. At planning staff's recommendation, the planning board voted to table the CUP proposal at the September 8th and October 6th meetings to give the applicant time to more thoroughly address issues of compatibility with the surrounding uses. Here you can see the proposed expansion areas shaded in blue with the dimensions shown. The building is about 40 feet wide. This floor plan shows the existing building hatched with the diagonal lines in the expansion area on all 4 sides. The square footage of the covered porch area on the west and south sides puts the building over the 5,000 square foot threshold for sprinkling the building. So the fire marshal has stated there are to be no tables or chairs in the covered porch area in order to be exempted from that square footage. The A2 fire classification of the building depends on this exemption. Tables and chairs in these areas will constitute a violation of the CUP if it is approved. And here you can see the expansion area. Staff conducted a site visit on August 12th at the request of a neighbor due to clearing and earthwork activities, and then again on the 15th with the county contract engineer and the road department superintendent, the assistant superintendent, to look at the road and the drainage issues. Planning staff determined a substantial amount of clearing had taken place, as you can see in the photo, some of which was in the floodplain. ADEQ was notified at that time, who then made their own site inspection and discussed their requirements with the applicant. It should be noted that at this time, the applicant is in compliance with ADEQ's requirements. Here are a couple photos the applicant submitted showing the existing vegetation on the north property line. It should be noted that a portion of the existing vegetation on the applicant's north property line may be rooted on the northern neighbor's property. Therefore, that vegetation could be subject to removal without notification or without the applicant's permission. Here are a couple photos showing the applicant had begun earthwork for the building expansion whenever we showed up for our first site visit. And they had begun work on the fire lane as well. Once planning staff was made aware the applicant was constructing site elements associated with the CUP proposal, The applicant was notified they would have to cease all work until the conditional use and preliminary large-scale development permitting were approved. The applicant understood and did stop all the site work. Staff has received several public comments for the CUP proposal. This is a list of all the things the opposed comments listed. And then this is a list of all the in favor neighbor comments listed. Staff has received 42 separate public comments in opposition to the proposal, plus an additional 3 opposed comments have been received since the time I sent you your staff reports. 18 separate public comments have been received in favor of the proposal, and since the time of the staff report, staff has received 1 additional letter from local real estate agent claiming property values should not be affected by this development. This public comment map depicts the proximity of the citizens making the comments. Some of the citizens appear to own property that is not within proximity to this proposed use. Planning staff was unable to map several of the comments due to addresses not being provided or by being outside Washington County. In response to specific neighbor concerns regarding the impact of additional traffic volume, planning staff made some assessments of proposed traffic on Schaefer Road and found that the total percentage increase in traffic volume due to the proposed event center will be from 9 to 19.7%, with 19.7% being the maximum increase in proposed traffic. A traffic study was conducted and submitted by Peters and Associates Engineers. The study evaluated existing traffic conditions in the vicinity of the proposed development, determined projected traffic volumes entering and exiting the site, and evaluated driveway intersection site distance. Dylan Cobb, the county contract engineer, reviewed the traffic study and commented to planning staff regarding the structural integrity of the road. Quote, "Due to low traffic volume indicated in the report, I would not recommend performing geotech work on the road. The majority of the traffic generated from this development will be from cars and light trucks. Typically, heavier vehicles, including buses and trucks, will do more damage to the road." Mr. Cobb then visited Schaefer Road one more time and commented further, quote, "I drove out to Schaefer Road this morning and would like to clarify a few things regarding the comment on safety. The concern with safety was for the section of Schaefer Road north of the proposed development from Cowan Road to Wilson Hollow Road. This section of road appeared to have narrow sections and limited vertical and horizontal sight distances. I would assume that the primary way of accessing the proposed development will occur from the south via Highway 71 and not from the north." Then to follow up, he agreed that since most traffic will not be coming from the north, that he does not have any concerns remaining in regard to safety due to narrow sections in Schaefer Road. The conclusion of the traffic study stated, quote, "With the very low existing and projected traffic volume on Schaefer Road at the site, from a service volume standpoint, the existing roadway in its current condition is adequate to accommodate existing and projected event traffic volumes. From a service volume standpoint, the existing Schaefer Road is expected to adequately accommodate the expected continued low number of vehicles with the site developed as proposed." There was an additional issue brought up by the traffic study, though. The proximity of where Schaefer Road intersects Highway 71 and where Wallen Mountain Road intersects Highway 71 are very close and can be confusing to motorists as it currently exists. The report goes on to say consideration could be given by Washington County to adding pavement striping as shown in the photo. This could be expected to improve the safety at the 2 intersections, allowing more direct access for each of the 2 roadways to and from Highway 71. If approved, the striping would be a cost share between the developer and the county. With the exception of the airport to the west, the surrounding uses are all residential and agricultural. While there are still concerns regarding compatibility, the applicant has attempted to address compatibility in the following ways. A traffic study has been conducted and based on service volume found Schaefer Road adequate to support the increase in traffic. The applicant has cleared vegetation in the area at the northeast corner of the property to maintain a clear line of sight for the sight distance requirement. This area must remain clear of vegetation, though, and will be an ongoing condition if approved. The applicant has left the existing vegetation, including some evergreen, in the fence row on their north property line in an attempt to provide a visual buffer to the north. The applicant has offered to install 200 feet of privacy fence along the northern property line adjacent to the building, or to plant the area with a mix of screening plants in an attempt to buffer the noise exiting the property, and left the option up to the northern neighbor to decide which would be preferable. The neighbor has chosen the planting plan rather than the privacy fence, so the buffer planting must be implemented approximately 5 to 8 feet south of the property fence line in order to maintain the integrity of the existing vegetation. Also, the applicant has commissioned a local landscape architect to provide that planting plan with the goal to buffer or reduce the noise crossing the property line. No events will be held in the front portion of the property. The applicant has limited events to one per day and 3 per week. The applicant has limited outdoor activities to daylight hours only. White River Landing grounds will close at 11 p.m. The applicant has agreed to allow stormwater from Schaefer Road to be redirected to the pond on their property. The applicant plans to remodel the existing shop building to include an addition on the north side. They plan to insulate the walls of the addition with the hope of reducing the volume of the noise exiting the building. No fireworks will be allowed. As part of the rental service, one of the applicants will be on site during all gatherings. White River Landing will not distribute alcohol to guests. Alcohol will be allowed only on a catered basis. A rule sheet will be supplied to the renters upon signing the contract. The applicant proposes a sign to be visible upon exiting the property, asking guests to be courteous of neighbors, to drive the speed limit, and to exit to the south only, toward 71. No outdoor amplified music will be allowed, with exception to the ceremony music. So the applicant has submitted a planting plan with plant selection and location, emphasizing buffering the noise from the building when crossing the northern property line, as well as screening the parking lot and its associated activities from the neighbors to the east. The planting plan includes plants like the loblolly pine. You can see here on the top of the image, the pine trees are colored in. I've done that with all the tree species on the following slides. There's the emerald green arborvitae, the much larger green giant arborvitae, the dwarf golden threadleaf cypress, and the dwarf Burford holly in a hedge along the eastern property line adjacent to Schaefer Road. The applicant has asked for an additional 6 months before implementing the eastern portion of the planting plan, which is something Washington County has allowed on previous projects. There's one more look at the planting plan. You can see on the north side of the building there is it's built up and mostly evergreen in that location. The CUP request was approved by the planning board, but now has 6 appeals filed. The main concerns cited in the appeals are that the property is too small for 60 cars to park. The surrounding property values will go down. The building is too close to the adjacent property line. It sets a bad precedent for future land development in the county. Sedimentation of the river will decrease water quality, and that the neighbors will be responsible for policing infractions. Addressing the size of the property in relation to accommodating 60 cars, the County Fire Marshal and the West Fork Fire Department have both reviewed the site plan and have expressed that they will have the ability to fight fire with the current parking area configured as proposed. Also, the 60 parking spaces the proposal is showing is a maximum number of cars. The applicant has stated that even though they would like to see each and every event reach its maximum capacity, they don't believe they will host 100 people and 60 cars for each event. This number simply represents the maximum amount that they can accommodate. Many public comments as well as multiple appeals have indicated they feel an event center at this location would decrease their property values. However, the applicant has submitted 3 letters from 3 local real estate agents indicating they feel otherwise. The letters from Dave Hodges and Kirk Elsaw were both in your staff report packets. The 3rd letter from Jane Newland, received after the staff report packets were distributed, expresses that in Jane's experience, the main objectives she typically hears are from buyers who specifically did not want to live near poultry or hog operations, dog kennels, or hunting or gun clubs. She goes on to say that these types of businesses might be assumed to be more acceptable in a rural county location, yet this is where she has heard more buyer concerns. And addressing the proximity to the property line, indeed, with the proposed expansion of the existing building, there will only be a small amount of separation between the building and the property line. but according to county ordinance, it will not set a bad precedent, as it is not asking for a variance from the established building setbacks. Also, the applicant has attempted to mitigate the noise crossing the property line by insulating the building and by implementing a planting scheme which, by design, will help reduce the noise to the north. Additionally, at the request of one of the neighbors, and in the interest of full disclosure of all the information that I have available, I present this table to you as in your staff report. It shows the 5 wedding venues county planning has reviewed in the last handful of years and the proximity of each to their exterior property lines. It shows the White River Landing Event Center sitting 12 feet from the property line at only 7¼ acres. There's one event venue with a smaller acreage, Haberton Wedding Chapel, but its owner also owns the 60-acre parcel surrounding the venue's 4-acre property. With Haberton, there's approximately a 600-foot separation to the nearest property line. So, although the proposed White River Landing doesn't have the smallest acreage of all the wedding venues in the county, it is closer to neighboring property lines than any of the others. And now to continue addressing the appeals, another big fear regarding this development, after having cleared understory vegetation down to bare soil, it is the tendency of stormwater to wash topsoil away, downhill to the river. This was planning staff's initial concern upon our first visit to the site, and that was when ADEQ was notified. Since that time, the applicant has been educated by ADEQ on best management practices, as well as regulations applicable to the site. It is staff's understanding that since the applicant has seeded the cleared area with grass, and that the cleared area is less than 5 acres, they're automatically covered under the Construction Stormwater Permit ARR 15 and are no longer in violation with ADEQ. And lastly, addressing the appeal that claims the neighbors will be responsible for policing infractions of the conditions of the CUP approval, it needs to be understood that the planning office is a regulatory body, not enforcement. We do everything we can to provide the best information to the planning board for their consideration, and in this case to the Quorum Court for your consideration of this appeal to the planning board's decision to approve the CUP proposal. If any neighbors or any other Washington County citizens, for that matter, are to find this commercial operation in violation of any of the conditions of approval, or in violation of any state or local laws for that matter, planning staff will accept the complaint on a case-by-case basis. We will investigate the complaint, make a determination as to whether the applicant is in violation, and if so, we'll work with the applicant to try to get them back into compliance. But if that cannot be done, staff will report the violation to the county attorney or whoever the applicable organization may be, so that the problem may be taken care of. The current proposal includes adding to the existing building approximately 1,940 square feet of indoor space and nearly 1,900 square feet of outdoor covered patio space for a total of over 3,800 square feet of additional floor space to the existing 2,640 square foot building. The finished building will be just over 6,900 square feet as proposed. The proposal also includes an outdoor volleyball area, outdoor cooking and smoking areas, paths, and parking for 60 cars. Staff feels that all of the technical concerns of the project have been adequately addressed for this stage of the development process, and the only remaining issue is the compatibility of the proposed event center with surrounding existing uses. Staff feels that in some ways an event center is similar to light commercial uses, such as a church or community center, which are both generally considered to be compatible to agricultural and residential uses. But this request is proposing a number of outdoor activities and programmatic elements that would potentially impact neighbors more than a traditional indoor community assembly area or church use. Also, the programmatic elements are for party gatherings and potentially activities that would create a noisier environment, both during daytime and nighttime hours, noisier than traditional light commercial community center or church uses. Staff has discussed compatibility concerns with the applicant numerous times, and the applicant has attempted to address compatibility in many ways, as discussed earlier and listed here. However, planning staff still have some reservations regarding compatibility with surrounding uses, and these reservations are primarily based on the close proximity to the neighboring properties. But, based on the mitigation of so many of the compatibility issues, even though some still remain, staff puts forth the following recommendation. Staff recommends approval of the proposed White River Landing conditional use permit with the following conditions. And there have been a couple changes since the time of planning board, and they will be here in red, and I'll just read them really quickly, and we'll be finished. We would like for the speed limit sign on Schaefer Road to be moved to a place where it's more obvious, where it can be seen easier from people traveling up the road. The final planting plan can be adjusted at large scale, but must be approved by planning staff. If the privacy fence is not wanted, the planting plan should be implemented 5 feet south of the property line so as to avoid removing the existing established vegetation. If any vegetation in the agreed upon buffer area is removed or dies, it must be replaced according to the approved planting plan. Care must be taken to preserve the existing vegetation along the north property line. No fireworks are allowed. No amplified music is allowed outdoors, with the exception to the music directly related to the wedding ceremony itself. All other music must stop, all other outdoor music must stop at 8 p.m. And implementation of this proposal must be generally as described by the staff report and in the applicant's letter of explanation. And so with that, I'm finished, and I would welcome your questions. Or if you would like to hear from the applicant, then I'll give up my seat.
Yes, let's do that.
I spoke with him just briefly before the meeting, and I'm just going to put this up on a slide that he requested for me.
Okay.
Here we go.
We have 30 minutes from the applicant and his supporters.
Okay, great.
I'd just like to thank the court, and I'd just like to start off and ask if any of the court members just has direct questions for me. Huh? I'm sorry. Oh, my name's Terry Presley. I'm sorry. I brought the property down there. It was in a bankruptcy foreclosure. I went in and remodeled the house, and my daughter lives down there now. And as you know, we want to remodel and add to the shop building and make it a wedding venue. And we're hoping that that'll be a place that lots of families and people can come celebrate a wedding or an anniversary or a birthday party, or, it's really pretty down there, and we want to add to that. I mean, we want to improve the area, and but is there any questions for me particularly?
Justice
Yes, sir.
Lloyd.
Mr. Presley, when you initially bought the property, did you buy the property with this in mind to make a commercial operation on the property?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
And
Sure.
how was that zoned at that particular time?
Well, it's my understanding that everything's zoned agriculture, residential, and then you, of course, go through this process, the conditional use process, right?
Thank you.
So, I mean, it was a bank-owned abandoned property with the door kicked in, and I think Nathan even has pictures of that, but since then, we've remodeled the house, and like I said, my daughter lives there, and she's attending college, so. But, it was our intention to have this business there. I mean, it's so close to Fayetteville. It's 1 mile from Highway 71. It's 3 or 4 miles from downtown Fayetteville, and we just thought it was the perfect spot to have a wedding venue.
Justice Bowman.
Thank you, Judge. Did you approach any of the neighbors out there and talk to them about this before you bought the property?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. I talked with Larry Kern and James Compton before I purchased the property. Sure
Okay,
did.
so there's only 2 of them that you talked to out there. And what did they tell you about that plan?
Larry Kern, as you can read in his letter, he was totally for it. And Mr. James Compton commented that he thinks that a person should be able to do with whatever they want with their property. Now, he's since sent in I think after, and I've had conversations with him a couple of times, and he has indicated to me that he felt obligated to side with the neighbors on the deal. So, but I did talk with those 2 prior to buying the property. Yes, sir.
Okay, are those adjacent to the property, or where are they located adjacent?
Yes, sir. Mr. Compton owns the property to the south.
All right.
And then Larry Kern lives in and owns the very first house south of the property.
Okay.
And understand it was only about a week-long process. When the property came up, it was a sealed bid type thing, and then you only had about a week to put in your bid, and then they opened the bids, and so that's how that process worked.
I'm surprised that you began construction on your proposal there before you ever approached anybody about rezoning.
Well, clearing land, I cleared about 2 acres. Didn't really realize that that's against any rules to clear.
But it appears from me from the early pictures that you had gravel brought in and built up around the site and so forth.
Yes, sir. I moved some red dirt in. Sure
Okay.
did.
Now, from what I understand, I don't remember the details about how close you're supposed to be to adjacent property with the building out there.
Mm-hmm.
But my impression was that the existing building is even closer to the property line than it was supposed to be, and that this is going to be an extension about 13 feet closer to the property line than existing.
Is there, yes, the extension is to put it about 12 feet.
Current county code calls for a 10-foot side setback, and the building is further away from that. With the addition, it will be 12 feet, so it still meets county code.
Okay.
And that's at the closest point. At the opposite end, it's 17 feet.
Okay.
So,
Okay, well, that's all my questions. Thank you.
okay.
Justice Harbison.
Mr. Presley, were you even aware that there was county zoning when you started?
Aware that there's counties, yes, ma'am. I knew that there was a process.
Did you contact the county planning office before you started any work?
No, ma'am, I did not contact them.
Thank you.
I cleared about 2 acres, and we moved some dirt, but that is correct.
Justice Giglio.
When reviewing the staff, the packet provided by staff, I have one question about information on page 13 and page 15 for you, Mr. Presley. And
Okay.
on page 13, it says that one of the conditions in the CUP is that no music will be played outside after 8 p.m. That's on page 15. And on page 13, it says that no music will be played outside except for wedding march. Do you intend only to allow the wedding march song to be played outside?
Well, if that's the requirements that the board, that the quorum puts on us, then absolutely. My sister will be, she's the one that will be managing the property and on site. But, most of the weddings we feel like will be indoors. But the reason for the porch and the grilling area is so that families can interact after the wedding, and they can immediately move to outdoors and grill some hot dogs and play volleyball, do horseshoes, stuff that family would do when they're out of town just to socialize. And I would point out that the area, the volleyball area and stuff, is at a lower elevation. It's down under a hill, and it's not visible from the road. And as you can see, even from this, you see where the shop building is. Yes, the shop building is very close to the property line, but our neighbors to the north house is not even in that frame. The only thing, it's just garden area, so.
So I'm correct in thinking then that if this conditional use permit is ratified, that the only music that will be played outdoors is the wedding march,
Yes, sir.
correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I've offered to build a privacy fence along the north. That was the first, one of the things I wanted to do because of the, to try to mitigate the noise and the stuff from the neighbors. And they decided they didn't want a privacy fence. So now we went back and we've done a landscape plan with all the trees and shrubs, the slides that you've seen. That was what, that was our next step. We're just trying to do as much as we can to shield our guests from the neighbors. from our weddings. And we think, I mean, Saturday afternoons is gonna be the primary time that this will be used. So,
Justice Ecke?
Thank you, Mr. Judge. Mr. Presley, what is your profession at present?
I own a plumbing company, plumbing business.
Okay. And you said your sister is in joint venture with you on this proposed?
Yes, I purchased the property, it is my property, and it is
Okay.
our intention, you know, if we're approved and we build this out, then we will become partners on it, yes.
Okay. Do either one of y'all have experience as events planners, organizers?
She does.
Would she come to the mic and share with us her background on this?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, can I just make a couple of statements, or would you like her now?
Well, I have a question of what's her
okay.
background?
Okay.
With weddings and events and planning, or is this something just you decided to do and felt like, well, let's
we'll
just
let
go
her-
on this venture together?
Let's let her speak to that then.
A little bit of both, what you just said.
Excuse me, Nathan, would you get her a chair so she could sit down, please? Either that or her brother can move over to that seat and she can have the nice big seat.
Thank you. My name is Vicki Presley Hassel, and I'm really the one that did start all of this. My profession is a court reporter. I've been in the court reporting business for, I think, about 25 years or so, and I'm an official reporter, work for a judge. But planning, having parties and things like that has just been a love of mine that I wanted to do, and it kind of got started whenever my daughter and her husband back there got married in August of 2015? August of 2015. And so, you know, it's just when we were looking for the wedding events for her place or her wedding or their wedding, not just hers, their wedding, you know, that's what got me started with this. I have helped with other weddings, you know, other family weddings and friends and that kind of stuff, but, you know, being a full planner was my daughter's, was the first one.
Okay, so at present, you're not licensed or have a business set
No,
up
ma'am.
as DBA?
No, ma'am.
And so your experience of doing this professionally, this would be the start?
Just been, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, it's just been a hobby. It's not been a profession at all.
Okay. The other venues that you visited and referenced, the acreage that those venues are on and this, did it concern you that perhaps it was a little too small?
Well, it did not concern me that it was too small because there's no specific size for any structure, you know, to be built on like that. Yes, it concerns me that it's, you know, fairly close to property line, and Mr. or Miss Bachman's garden. I know she, you know, loves to garden. I've been out there with her, not in the garden, but I've been out there talking to her. We have visited a lot, and but you know, we wanted to use the structure that was already there instead of, you know, just building a completely new structure, just using what is there for economic purposes, you know, recycling.
When y'all decided, Mr. Presley, when you decided to purchase the property, you were fully aware that perhaps it was a 50-50 gamble, either heads or tails. It could either go one way or the other,
Absolutely.
correct?
I mean,
I mean, you were aware of that, weren't you? And I'm
Yes,
sure
yes,
that
ma'am.
Kirk Elsall would have advised you.
absolutely.
that.
Any business is a gamble. I mean, right?
But there's more security and more assurities when it's a well-laid-out plan. And that's why you go through a plan, and to make sure that this property or your venture is well thought out from the beginning to the end, and you overcome whatever variances are in place.
I feel like we've thought it out pretty well myself.
Okay,
We looked
I'm
at-
asking.
I mean,
So
we've-
this is your opportunity to let us know.
She's,
We looked at property for over a year and, trying to find a good location. We felt like this was a good location because of how close it is to Fayetteville. We totally understand that this is home, for the people that live on Schaefer Road. Definitely understand that. But this is also at the end of the airport runway, where, there is commercial
Which
going on.
means- Okay,
Where there is commercial businesses going on, commercial activity. The Arkansas-Missouri Railroad is just a few hundred yards, from this property. Just want to point out that, there's been a lot said about how will ruin their peace and quiet, but there's so many other things that go on there, that affect peace and quiet other than just people being, outside and talking. I will be on the property every time there's an event going on, and probably my daughter or my mother, or there will be more, than just me there to help,
let me ask
police
you this.
this.
On the parking lot, you have it planned for 60 cars, is that correct?
yes, ma'am,
Do you have overflow
yes.
on your property?
I think it's on the site plan.
And then after that overflow, is there a contingency plan?
Well, the A-frame house there has, that belongs to me, and there's a concrete driveway. You can see it there to the, I mean, there can be,
I bring that up because I did attend a wedding up in Rogers, and the parking, the overflow, and then there was parking in residents' driveways and all up and down
Right.
the street, and they were getting ticketed and towed.
that's.
While they were
That would not
enjoying.
be a problem, because as you can tell, there's a paved driveway going to the A-frame house and all that front yard. There's a concrete driveway that would hold 20 cars itself on that.
Well, the reason I'm asking, I mean, would that hold 20 cars per, as a fact?
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
You're sure, but was a feasibility study done on that, yes, it can hold 20 cars
We.
in a straight line, or are you going to be parking them how?
The parking plan was for 51 or 2 or 3 vehicles, and then we did the additional 8. I think there was additional 8 spots, so it's a total of like 60 or 61.
Okay.
The occupancy load for the building was based at 100, so,
And-
our.
You just never know. Sometimes this happens, and
Yes,
like
ma'am.
I said, a well-laid plan is a successful plan.
And I feel like that we've tried to address everything that's come up. I mean,
Okay.
Surveyor's been out there twice, surveying site distance and property lines. I mean, the road, the serviceability of the road, I had the engineer came out, the traffic study was done, to ensure that the road could handle the traffic.
Well, this is your opportunity, so I'm just going to go ahead and yield the floor to other questions.
I just
but
want to make one
Go
other
ahead.
comment on
Go
that.
right ahead.
The other facilities that are around are for larger weddings. Our capacity is 100, and so we know that whenever you are asking about 20 more cars or 30 more cars, we don't feel like there would be that 20 or 30 more cars just because of we are gearing ourselves just towards the smaller weddings, not ones with 250 people.
Okay, thank you.
Justice Bowman.
Thank you, Judge. Guys, one of the things that I think that entered my mind right away, I'm out there looking at the situation, you guys realize that this is zoned agricultural residential.
Yes, sir.
And the first thing I thought about was, if your neighbors to the north of you decide they're gonna put a hog pen out there, right adjacent to the property line, that's gonna be a tremendous negative impact on your wedding venue. And since it is already zoned as residential and agricultural, that's very much a part of the whole picture. And I wondered if you'd given consideration to that fact.
Well, obviously, I mean, they have every right to do what they want on their property, just as I feel like that we should have the right to do with what we want on our property, as long as we're not what was the term I think Courtney used earlier, as long as we can exist in harmony?
Yep,
Um,
yep.
I mean, the old saying is, good fences make good neighbors, so,
Yep,
I mean,
yep.
I guess if they want to build a hog farm, we'll build a big fence, I guess.
I don't know how you mitigate odor. But,
Well,
but anyway, I don't know who all these folks are back here.
Sure.
But I think indicates there's pretty strong resistance to the
Yes, sir.
project.
and we understand that. I mean, they've lived there for years, and, I mean, we know that, but,
Yep.
the property came available, and like I said, it was only a week or so, and
Yes,
some
sir.
of the neighbors tried to buy it as well.
Yep.
And, I was a fortunate one to get it. It's very beautiful down there, and we're not trying to destroy that. We're trying to add to that.
Okay.
And we think that its proximity to Fayetteville, it's 1 mile from 4-lane highway.
Yes.
There's 6,400 cars a day that go down that highway, and that's
Yep.
based on Arkansas Highway Traffic Department.
Yep, yep.
The information, there's over 24,000 flight operations that happened at Drake Field last year. Over 24,000, they call flight operations, takeoffs, landings. The planning staff has indicated that this type of facility is typically a buffer between residential and commercial. If we have a few guests outside playing volleyball after a wedding on a Saturday afternoon, that's down under the hill, that's not visible from the road,
Yeah.
that may be visible from the neighbor's garden, I don't really see how, I don't see how that's gonna be hurting their way of life.
I understand what you're saying. I guess the key thing I think that concerns me probably most about it, number one, is the proximity to the property line. Number two is the fact that you knew when you bought it, is agricultural residential. And that was a process had to be gone through, and that you could be rejected on that premise.
Absolutely.
Okay.
All of it's that way. Now, and with the design of the building, the addition of the building, I took into consideration the bride's room and the groom's room and the storeroom are actually on the north side of the property.
As a buffer.
Yes, sir, to act as more of a buffer
Yeah.
so that the people are, in the building and they're out on the porch. So the bride's room, groom's room, storage room, and all that serves as additional shielding to the north because of the property line is so close. And,
Okay.
that's just where the building was. I wish it was 100 feet away, but it's not, so.
Okay, thank you.
I want to add one more thing about, I believe, sir, you had asked about my brother speaking to Mr. Compton and Mr. Kern before buying the property. And like you said, that was before buying the property. Immediately after buying the property, within a week, 2 weeks, I'm sure, 2 weeks, we spoke to several neighbors up and down the road. They would stop by, ask what we're doing. We even went, knocked on a couple of doors, to let them know what we were doing. So, and the general response we got from everyone was, that sounds like a good idea. It sounds like a great idea. It's a beautiful place to have a wedding. So that was, a huge factor in, some of the dirt work being done, was us getting, approval from the neighbor saying, yeah, that sounds good. Yes, and we were, proceeded with the cup after that, to go through with the proper channels of, getting the conditional use permit, but, the neighbors were for us. That's it.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Justice Bond.
I do have a concern here, but I want you to understand, my heart goes out to somebody that's trying to do something with a piece of property they bought, and trying to make improvements and have a nice kind of a small business. But it bothers me a little more when we're talking about, only 1 mile of road, and you're just only so far from the city of Fayetteville. But to go around and through the city of Greenland and then come back to it, by that shorter distance of gravel, which is maybe a half a mile. You know, I was familiar with the property before I went out to look at it. And I came from the Fayetteville area. And since I was familiar with that location and that neighborhood, you might want to make a guess, which direction did I come from? Did I drive on down through the city of Greenland and then turn back a mile? Or since I'm an old country boy, I might have just, you know, driven in there from the south. And, you know, I do, since this Quorum Court zoned this agriculture and single-family resident when we did, I have to consider and comply with the ordinance. And there are several people living in that neighborhood that are going to be now looking at quite a bit more traffic if y'all's business is successful. You know, if it was any consolation to them, I would say many of the people that were coming out to look at your location would not drive, even if they came around from the Greenland area. When they got to that place where the pavement ended, many of your potential customers, you know, you would have the little bride sitting there saying, whoa, wait, let's go back. So it might not be that bad, but the people living to the north of your venue they're gonna be eating a lot of dust when it's dry like it is. The roads, I hate to complain about my own county roads, but the roads are very inadequate. Thank you. I hope you understand. I hope you appreciate my.
Sure, and I think that there's only 2 houses to the north of my property to where the pavement is with a new bridge, the new Tilly Willie Bridge. I think there's the Bachman property and one more property where actually people live. So, because I've been through there several times myself. And I know there's 2 for sure. Maybe there's 3.
Any other questions? You still have about a couple minutes. Any other supporters want to make any comments? Any supporters?
I just want to make
Go
one
ahead.
more quick comment. I just want to say that, you know, if this thing's approved, you know, it's our intention to make a nice place, a beautiful place. You've seen some of the pictures of what we want to do, and it's her idea. I mean, she's wanted to do this for years, and she's talked to me about it, and I mean, it's just a place that we want to have, a nice, beautiful place for families to come and, you know, celebrate weddings. I mean, that's the primary thing, and we feel like that Saturday afternoons is going to be the primary time of business. I don't know what else we can say, or, you know, I just felt like that its proximity to town and the highway, and that, you know, that it was, to me, it was almost a no-brainer that, you know, change is coming. I've lived here 40 years. I mean, I've seen lots of change, as I'm sure that each one of you have, and whether we want it to or like it or not, I mean, things change. So some for good. You know, a lot of things change for good. Northwest Arkansas voted in the top 10 again. Fayetteville's number 5 again for the places to live, and we're all seeing, you know, more and more people's moving to the area. And I work in the construction, and I see it, I mean, all the time people are moving in. So we feel like that this business and this location could be a success if we're allowed to do this.
I'd like to thank both of you guys for visiting and sharing with us. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
All right. Okay, and now we'll go ahead and have remarks for those who are in opposition. So who have filed, if you filed the appeal, did you file the appeal? Okay. Good evening.
Hello,
Go ahead and state your name for our,
Nessa McDaniel.
and then go ahead.
I live directly across the street. We met with Miss Vicky on her property, and I can't say that everybody agreed with it, but I definitely told her, me and my husband met with her, we said no. And the reason why we said that, because we know how it feels to have noise right across the street. The person that used to live there, we understood what he was going through. He lost both parents, and he also had drug issues. I'm just being truthful. And we understand he was hurting. So to have, like she said, holes in the doors and stuff like that, you can hear it all. The noise echoes across in our yard. I could imagine him on Fridays. He would have friends over there with 4 cars, and it was just noisy and miserable. So imagine 50 times 10. And they also said that the noise would be on the inside. It's a venue. I never known a celebration to be in the inside all day. Eventually, noise, they're gonna have to come out the building and laugh, talk, open and close doors. And Saturdays are my relaxation that time. We woken up to beer bottles across the street in our yard, getting up for church Sunday mornings and stuff like that. Our biggest situation is we have a college student as well, like they do, that work, and she comes home from work late. I don't want nothing to happen to her on coming. There is, I know they had the road test, but on that gravel road, there's like a little curve. It is so narrow. And if you're not careful, you're gonna have a head-on collision, but it's been approved, however the trafficking, but I beg the difference because I drive it every day. And for security, I know Miss Vicky said that it's gonna be 3 females, her mom, and her daughter, and no alcohol, but there's such thing as bring your own bottle. And who's to say that a person is not gonna get drunk, come over my property, get hurt, fall? I don't know. I just don't know how it's gonna go, who's gonna be responsible. And as far as traffic on both ends that they have cut out, I know they want everybody to go to the right, but what if somebody is drunk and go to the left? That road is pitch black and dark, and there's steep hills that go into the lake and all this kind of stuff, and dirt travels over in my yard. I have trees, but the dirt still comes for the traffic. But our biggest fear as well is, I too have a friend that does real estate, and she talked to me, and it's fearful that I won't be able to sell my property with a venue across the street. I don't know anyone of our age that want to live somewhere where it's partying, so it goes both ways. That's basically it. For as noise is one of our biggest pet peeve. We lived it with the guy that was there. It was awful. It was terrible. Beer bottles everywhere, just constant noise all the time. And especially if they're saying it's just going to be Saturdays for weddings. Weddings are not quiet. It's celebrations. And even if it's down by the river, the volleyball, you can still hear noise. And the reason why I know, because I lived it. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. In the Drake Airport, it does have noise, but that noise is up in the air and it's gone. It's not a constant thing. And for the museum, we can't hear anything that's inside the museum because it's not that close how she said it was. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. State your name and
Yes, sir.
good evening.
This is, good evening, and it's good to see so many alive and alert faces up there. Thank you, guys. I'm Janet Bachman. I'm the neighbor with my husband, Jim Lukens, who live right across the road. And I'm sorry, right across the fence. And in that photo, the red line going across is the fence line. And those garden beds are where I spend hours and hours to grow specialty cut flowers and vegetables and some small fruits like blackberries and raspberries and strawberries that I sell mostly at the Fayetteville Farmers Market. but also to restaurants and florists in the Northwest Arkansas region. I grew up on a small farm. My parents, I'm the oldest of 8. My parents did not let any of us stay on the farm. They said, it's hard work. You can't make a living. Go to college. Well, sometimes eventually you learn your parents knew what they were talking about. But I still like that lifestyle, and I always wanted to be on a farm and doing something with the land. And we moved to Fayetteville in 1989. My husband Jim shares similar values. We were blessed to find this 127 acres close to Fayetteville, with about half of that acreage is a wooded, rocky hillside. The other half has some good soil, good water. The West Fork of the White River runs through it. And every day we say we were so blessed to be here. That was 1989. 24 years ago, in order to pay for that land, we worked for many years at off-farm jobs in the agriculture field, but we're both retired now. I mean, you know what was retired, right? But this will be my 24th year to sell at the Fayetteville Farmers Market. And we don't live just in our house. My husband has goats. He's out in the morning to check on them, in the evening to check on them, and many hours during the day to make sure the fences are where they're supposed to be. During the growing season, I'll be cutting flowers from February through November, depending on, when we get frost. And during the busiest part of the season, I may be out there 12 hours a day. Saturday afternoon, is that the wedding party? I don't know, but that is my time to collapse if there's a farmer's market. I tell my husband, do not talk to me. I want quiet. I want quiet. And I may go out onto the hammock for that quiet. We sleep with our windows open. During the summer, we don't use air conditioning. So any outdoor noise, our house is 500 feet from the shed. My garden is just across, maybe 20 feet from that shed. And then I have gardens down in the bottom too. And there, I can see from my garden clear across Presley's property, which is not as wide as that red line shows. It's much more narrow. Comes to about this much river frontage down at the bottom. Anyway, Mr. Presley has stated that the neighbors are far away and cannot see down there in where the horseshoes and wandering paths are, but I can see across that whole distance. Most of the vegetative buffer that existed is now gone. Presley cleared a lot of it himself, and then the electric line people cleared for 30 feet, 15 feet on each side of the line that runs down through there. And so there's very little vegetative buffer left. A few cedar trees, a fair amount of privet, and honeysuckle, which we would like to remove because they're invasive aliens. The landscape plan that they've submitted with, or they're putting together, I think would be nice. It'd be beautiful. It would help their wedding guests not have to see me working in the garden, and it would give me some visual barrier also, but I doubt that it would do much for noise. I think the noise, to me, will be the most disturbing thing. And we moved there because we like the country and like the quiet. The ordinance that we're dealing with states, and I'm quoting, I'll read it so I'm not mistaking anything. The conditional use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the surrounding areas for the purposes already permitted, nor substantially diminish and impair property values within the surrounding area. We believe this property is just too small and too close to neighbors for the proposed use. It would definitely impair my enjoyment and use of our adjacent property. And if we want to sell this land, our property, to somebody who wants to use it in a similar way and has similar values to ours, we don't think they would want to buy it if there's an event center right next door. Okay. I thank you for your time. Any questions?
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for listening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Go ahead and state your name.
My name's Jim Lukens. I'm Janet's husband. She and I share the property just to the north. And this morning I looked on the website, at the Quorum Court website for this meeting, and so I realized that you have a tremendous amount of information that's been presented to you in written form. Janet and I tried in our written appeal to be concise but full in our explanation, and I know you have the opportunity to read those. So right now I want to focus on the two objections we have that are most important to us and really most basic. Janet has mentioned them both. Now I want to emphasize that it's true that we hold no animus against Mr. Presley or Mrs. Hassel, but we really believe that they chose an inappropriate piece of property to purchase to fulfill that dream of having a rural event center. We really feel like the building that was already existing and will become the primary event property or building for the event center is too close. 12 feet is too close, and I understand that the ordinance for buildings of any type say there needs to be at least a 10-foot setback from the property line. In this case, 12 feet obviously meets that requirement. As I realize that event centers are relatively new and relatively rare to be permitted by Washington County. There are many event centers in the county, but most of them are within the bounds of towns or cities, and so are permitted under those rules. And Mr. Crouch has already mentioned the other event centers that are permitted by the county in the rural areas. None of those event centers have the buildings this close to the property line. They're all at least 50 feet from the property line. And Mr. Crouch mentioned the one event facility that is on a small acreage, but within a 60-foot or a 60-acre piece of property owned by the same person. I did a cursory review of standards that other jurisdictions have set for event centers, and it wasn't full review, but found 20 acres as a minimum was very common, and found 50 feet from the property line for event activities, not just buildings, but the activities, to be very common. So Janet and I really believe that the property is too small for this kind of event center, and the building and activities are too close to the property line, and realize that the planning board had very little guidance in the ordinance for this type of development. And so in addition to encouraging you to disallow this conditional use permit, I'd urge you to also consider in the future establishing some criteria for event centers. As Mr. Presley said, the population is growing. It may be a growing demand for event centers in the country. And I think additional criteria would be useful to the planning board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lucan. Good evening.
Hello. Thank
State
you
your
all
name.
for allowing this. My name is Nancy Hartney. I live at 5724 South Schaefer. I'm about a mile down the road on the paved part of the road leading into this proposed event center. I'm not going to call it an event center as I bring up my concerns. It is a for-profit commercial endeavor that you heard Mrs. Hassel say that it is a hobby with her. This is not a hobby with me. It's where I live. And I, without going over septic system that needs to be put in for 100 people, the road issues, the dirt, the dust issues, the policing issues by the county sheriff's department, the possibility of erosion into the river and the continued pollution of the river. Let's just skip over all of that because you have that very well stated, very articulately stated in your packet. The thing that keeps jumping out at me is that when this was first proposed, and Mr. Couch put up a list of those things, those concerns that the neighbors had, and then those reasons that the commercial property wanted to be developed. And there were 35 objections and reasons not to allow this CUP, to disallow it, and 11, one of which was, it's a dream. It's Vicky's dream was one of the reasons. So I think that there's a difference in weight with the reasons here, 35 versus 11, and the 35 having a bit more weight to them, in my estimation. Also, we've skimmed over recreational use. Several times the folks here have said, well, this is so close to Fayetteville. It's just wonderful. It's just make a perfect commercial property. But the recreational use by our neighbors in Fayetteville, by Greenland, by the Greenland track team, by the University of Arkansas track team, all of that recreational use is going to suffer impact if a commercial property, an event center, commercial for-profit center is established there. Horseback riders, bikers, track teams, all use that property, and they use it because it is close to Fayetteville. It is very accessible. As we grow and as this county changes and has to do some planning with how to develop and how to structure the county intrasystem, then we are losing a possibility for very close recreational use when we look at the area. The recreational use will increase, I think, when we have the city or the two cities, Greenland, Fayetteville, all growing, will need that things. And you've already seen on something that was presented tonight, the use by the bike trails coming through that area. So there are already plans to continue developing that recreational use with the property. The other thing that kind of jumps out at me is that we're talking an absentee landowner here that is going to be developing some commercial property just down the road from where I live. And we've had some issues already, or we've talked about enforcement issues and enforcement things. How long has this taken just for us to get to this point tonight to say we need to reconsider and look at how this county is being planned and what kinds of use our land is being put to, and how much our stewardship of that land are we going to try and preserve, and how much of it are we going to just lose in small chips and bits and pieces. So thank you. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate your questions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Wood. How are you?
Well, Mr. Wood, how are you?
Good.
Well, as you may have guessed, my name is Wood, Ron Wood. I live on South Schaefer. We live where the pavement ends and the dirt road begins. But I think my wife will address those concerns in a bit. The reason I am here has to do with Mr. Compton, the neighbor. I am Mr. Compton's designated representative tonight. I manage the property that he owns. He is in Colorado on business. And shall we say Mr. Compton's position has been mischaracterized, misstated. He's been opposed to it since he saw the formal application. In fact, he appealed from the Planning Commission. Here's a list of everything he is opposed to and his explanations for why. That is in your packet. Please look at it. I was in on at least one of those early calls. Mr. Compton and I were driving somewhere in the middle of South Louisiana on the way to a fishing trip. The proposal was not, it was vague, for lack of a better term. Mr. Compton responded that basically he didn't care what other people did with their own land in a very generic way. After seeing the proposal, he has been opposed, as I said. And if you will go over those, I think you'll understand why. If you have questions for me or for Mr. Compton, please feel free to ask. Have you guys been able to find that in the packet? Nate?
There's 100 pages worth of comments. I'm not sure what page number it is.
But it is in there. In fact, Mr. Compton first opposition in writing was September the 8th. Mr. Compton's property line is the bottom red line. It's actually the creek. That line is a little low. But that's our most productive hayfield across the creek from this. It's also an area where my wife rides horses. Questions?
Thank you, sir. Good
That
evening.
seemed like an appropriate segue. Thank you. My name is Rebecca Wood, and as Ron mentioned, I am his wife, and we manage the property that Mr. Compton owns. However, I believe he has fully addressed that particular issue. My issues have been stated by numerous comments already. One by Ms. Bachman. She quoted one of the conditional use rules through the county. She quoted number 6. I quote number 5, that the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the conditional use will not be detrimental or endanger public health, safety, morals, or the general welfare of the surrounding properties. And the statement earlier by Mr. Presley that he talked to all the neighbors and they were all for it, I believe is misrepresented, because of the 14 residents on that 1 mile stretch of road, all but one are opposed. And I believe most of them, if not all of them, had sent in letters as such. So if we look at how that will be injurious to the neighbors, again, they have commented the increased dust. If we look at full capacity use, at 60 car capacity on that 1 mile stretch of road to and from, that's 15, well, excuse me, with the 60 cars, that's 18,870 additional trips on that one stretch of road that has narrow blind curves. It's incredibly dusty, and it does have numerous pedestrians. We also, many of us spend time outside, I believe as one of the neighbors already mentioned. Saturday, the day that they're anticipating their highest use, is a day when many people, those of us who work, are outside. I'm outside, like Ms. Bachman, every day, at least twice a day, because I have animals, horses, goats, so forth. We have gardens. So that increased dust, the increased noise factor on a dirt road is very loud. So those two things combined would be incredibly disruptive and indeed in some cases could drive us in. Imagine sitting outside trying to grill your hamburgers and 50 cars start streaming by to go to an event. That's going to drive you inside, I can guarantee you. I live out there. We live, as Ron mentioned, right where the pavement ends. The biggest problem we have is drivers who are unfamiliar with that road. They don't realize when the pavement ends. They do not necessarily drive that 25 miles per hour because, one, the sign you can't see. But they hit that, and we've had multiple instances where the cars have fishtailed, gone through our fence, gone through the neighbors' yards, and our neighbors down the roads have had the similar circumstances. Let's see. I would like to also mention that I know that they've said they want people to exit, again, toward the south. However, many of us know, particularly those of us who live out there, we see it happen. If people have been drinking at an event, they're not going to go through the south and then go through Greenland. They're going to go through that northern road. It's not patrolled. It's a much easier way. And that's just something to keep in mind. The public safety of those pedestrians, we have at least 45 UA runners every weekend on Saturdays is typically the day they run. We have several other schools, Greenland, Shiloh Christian, not to mention all the biking clubs. There are runners out there almost every hour of the day. They're not always in large groups. Very often they are in large groups.
Hey, Ms. Wood,
I'm sorry, yes.
That's going to be your time.
I apologize.
No, it's fine, that's fine. Any final remark for you? Any
No.
final remark? Okay.
No, I do have, however, photographs. If any of you, I appreciate many of you being able to come out there. If you didn't, I do have photographs of the roads. If you would like this in a packet, I also addressed the issue of the airport noise, which is I didn't think was an issue, and the road noise, which is actually decreased tremendously with I-540, and that it's no longer a commercial airport. Those
Okay.
statistics are in there.
All right, thank you very much. Justice Pine?
Yes.
I didn't quite catch it. Y'all live north of that facility or south?
We live south. We live,
Okay.
yeah, south.
All right.
Just, we live right where the pavement ends.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. It was probably me.
Thank you, thank you. Justice Madison, you want to go ahead and?
So I think that we're still on the first reading, but, so I think I make a motion to suspend the rules or to, okay. Okay, well, I would like to have our county attorney read 6.2 then, please. Do you want to make a motion to suspend the rules and read by title only?
Yes. I'd like to make a motion that,
At the appropriate time, yeah. So we got a
I'd
motion?
like to make a motion to suspend the rules and read it by title only.
There's been a motion, we need a second? Second. It's been moved and properly second. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay,
This was 6.2. An ordinance denying a conditional use permit granted by the Planning and Zoning Board.
And so now I would make a motion, and let me just say for the benefit of the court, I know the folks that have been involved in this have come to the planning board already several times. And while this typically would be heard by the quorum court 3 times, we can conduct it all in one evening. And not only does that save your time, but it saves the county money, because if we have to have a second meeting, it will be a special meeting like tonight is. And so I think that we've gotten a lot of information. Staff has worked very hard to inform us. And so I feel like we're well informed. We've heard from everyone. And so my goal is to get everyone done tonight. So that's what I'm accomplishing or trying to accomplish. So I would make a motion to suspend the rules and advance this to second reading by title only.
there's been a motion, there's been a second.
A little bit of discussion. I see some questions on their faces. Could you, Mr. Lester, clarify exactly what Ms. Madison was trying to explain as far as advancing it to make a decision for tonight? I don't want anybody to misunderstand
So
our procedures.
the rules
To
require
answer your
that
question.
this is heard on 3 separate readings. The quorum court has the authority to suspend those rules and read this ordinance on all 3, or just 2 if they so choose, readings tonight. If they suspend the rules, if it's read 3 times, then their vote on this will be final. There will be no other hearing before this quorum court. Any action thereafter would be a possible appeal to the circuit court. Yes, there will be a resolution tonight. So,
All right, so it's been moved and properly second to suspend the rules on the second reading. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, so then it's just
There's no motion. We did, yeah. There's no motion yet. We're just trying to get it to third
That's
reading.
right. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? All right.
all right, an ordinance denying a conditional use permit granted by the Planning and Zoning Board.
I have a question. So there are 2 ordinances, and so we just wanted to make sure that you guys are deciding that you're gonna go with 6.2 as a whole. That's what you're gonna focus on and not 6.1.
That was my
That was the
intention.
motion that was made, so that's the
Yes.
motion that's on the table.
That's correct. All right, last one.
So I'd now make a motion to suspend the rules and advance this to the third and final reading by title only for 6.2.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second to suspend the rules for reading 3. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay.
An ordinance denying a conditional use permit granted by the Planning and Zoning Board. I would now, before we take a vote, I do want to remind all the justices that under our rules of appeal, basically you sit just as the Planning Board sat, and I provided a copy of our Washington County Code, Section 11-200, which is the criteria for allowance of conditional uses. There are 7 categories or 7 paragraphs there that are the 7 things the Planning Board must look at when they're considering. You are also required to consider that as well. As we vote, I would ask, and I'm going to take some notes, that I need you to also indicate, you can do it by number or however you want, but to indicate why it is you're voting the way you are so that we can preserve and establish a record so that if this is appealed to the circuit court, we have some sort of record as to how this court voted. Do I have any questions on that? Okay.
Ms. Carly, you going to do roll call?
Well,
And
we'll make a motion, yeah. Probably, yeah.
Discussion.
public comments?
Well, let me
Then
make a
it's
motion to pass it. Can we make a motion?
First one.
Okay.
Okay.
So now that we're on the third and final reading, or have completed it, I would make a motion that we pass 6.2. And if I may, Judge, offer my comments as the sponsor of the motion. So I'm listed.
Let me second it.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm listed in the agenda as the sponsor of both ordinances because I'm the chair of county services. As I understand it, this is in J.P. Harbison's district. Yes, it is. But I'm the designee because of my role as the chair of county services. I have looked at all the information very thoroughly, and without exception, all the comments that I received were against this proposal. I received numerous very thorough emails and talked to some folks, including Ms. Bachman, about this, and didn't hear actually from the proponents of the plan until tonight. And so I was very one-sided in terms of me coming here today. And we've had similar projects like this before the court that have been appealed from the planning board. And I came down a different way then. And largely it's because I feel like this is really too small a piece of property to do what we're doing, what is proposed. And also it's too close to the edge of the property. If there were a way to get it away from the neighbors. And so my attention especially is drawn to the compatible use. And specifically to number 4, the way the properties surrounding this parcel are being used. There's just not a way to insulate the use that's proposed from the way it's used. The other properties that we've seen like this have had much more buffer and a lot better infrastructure to support this kind of project. I'm a little concerned, the ones we've seen before, there have been really, really good plans for how the project would be implemented, and I just don't have that level of comfort with this one right now. And so primarily based on number 4, but also to some extent items 5 and 6 on our list for the criteria. I know that staff, I believe, originally did not recommend approval of this to the planning board, and you all do this all day long. So that's why I've made a motion to adopt 6.2, which would be to deny the CUP. Thank you, Judge.
Any other comments?
This is in my JP district, and probably all the people involved in this project are in my JP district. So, but number 1, I just feel, and I stated at the planning board, that the piece of property was too small for the desired use of that property. The other thing I really want to emphasize here, that this road does not have much car traffic on it. And that's why it's used for all of these other recreational activities, walking, running, horseback riding. Also, there's a dust problem, which I'll be discussing with the road department, because I've had several complaints, especially this summer, with the dust problem along that road. I mean, there is so much dust just with the normal use now that it's on the grass and the fences along that road. So, you know, this would not work. This use would not be a good use because of the county road situation also. So I believe in property rights, but this piece of property is way too small for the proposed activities. And I plan to go to the planning board and for us to set up some rules for event centers. I think we just have some general things and that we need some rules and regulations that apply to these event centers out in the county. I know when we did the setbacks that I was very opposed to the 10-foot setback in the rural area because 10 foot from the fence is almost sitting on the fence as it is. And when you've got several hundred acres and people are building houses around, you know, they need to be away from your fences. 10 feet is not far enough. So, you know, there are several issues here, but I'll be voting for the passage of 6.2. Thank you.
Justice Pine.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm citing number 4, that the proposed uses, and I'm saying it's not compatible with the surrounding area, and as I pointed out earlier, we can't make some kind of law to stop people from going north, coming in and out of there from the north, which is the way they're going to come from Fayetteville. And definitely if they've been there enjoying themselves and imbibing in alcoholic beverage, they're going to go north toward Fayetteville. They're not going to drive south out and then drive through Greenland. Maybe all that's assumption, and I'm not sure it's legal for me to make the statement I'm making. I might should have asked Mr. Lester before I made such a strike anything that's going to get me in trouble. But,
Thank you, Justice Pine.
You know, my concern is probably more with the people that live to the south because of the increased traffic there and the dust. The road is just inadequate for this sort of business, and my heart does go out to these folks. I think they had a good plan here, but I just don't think it's going to work out for the neighborhood. Thank you.
Justice Pine, thank you. Justice Lloyd and then Justice Lundstrom.
Thank you, Judge. First of all, I'd just like to cite the number 4 there, proposed use being compatible with the surrounding area. All the notifications that I have received and comments and complaints from the people and the property owners out there have all been opposed to this. But basically, number 3, that adequate utilities, roads, and so forth are available. We have one road or one direction that most of the cars will be coming from and to. We're talking about increasing the usage on that road, 150 cars a week if everything goes as they're planned. That's 300 trips up and down that one road. You're talking about the dust going everywhere. When dust leaves a road, there's less material on the road. The county is responsible for maintaining that. Now, when you have that much more traffic, that's going to cost the county to maintain that road even more. So just citing these two things, I'm going to have to vote for the passage of 6.2. Thank you, Judge.
Justice Lundstrom.
I also am going with number 4 on the Code of Ordinances, as well as number 7. And I was also concerned about our fire marshal just not allowing chairs to get this in conformity with the sprinkling code, because I don't think he's going to be out there to see if anybody puts chairs in that area or not. And if you've got candles burning and so forth at a wedding, there's a risk of fire. So that was a concern of mine. Another concern is the size of the property as well, and the setback from the other property line. So I also will support 6.2. Thank you, Judge.
Senator Justice Madison.
Thank you, Mr. Judge. I drove out there this morning, and I particularly looked to see what the neighborhood was like. I was looking for other enterprises that might generate some traffic. I only saw residences. I mean, maybe somebody might decide to sell a tractor and have somebody come out and look at it, but I didn't see anything that looked like it would generate traffic. And so people, when they buy land in the country to live, usually do that because they appreciate peace and quiet. And, you know, if somebody comes to look at a tractor once every 6 months, that's not going to be a big impact on the neighborhood. But when you have suddenly, all at once, 50 cars coming and going, or even if it's just 20 cars coming and going to an event, that is a major disruption. And whether we pick number 4, 5, or 6, I think it's going to affect their use and enjoyment and comfort in their property. I also got a lot of comments, and I would like to say, oftentimes people become very heated in their comments when a proposal like this hits. And every comment I got was so nice and respectful, especially the very nice letter from the Rust family. I don't know if they're here or not, but it really was a very, very nice, calm letter. One last thing, I looked at the landscape plans that were proposed, and not a single plant on that list is native to Washington County. So it does impress me that there is really a general disregard for rural life in Washington County with this proposal. So I will be voting yes on 6.2.
Justice Patterson.
Well, I drove out there twice. I live east of Springdale a few miles, but I went down there twice, about a week apart. And number 3, in my opinion, that could be fixed. Money is what it would take. Number 4, 5, and 6, I had problems with those 3. And the main one is just proximity to the river. You put a septic system in where the floodplain is, you got a problem. I live in the country, have a septic system, but, you know, that many people, that's going to take a big system. And that's our drinking water on down the stream. So but I gave it a fair shot. I don't like to deny anything, but I went back again to be sure I want to change my mind, but I really didn't. Spend about 30 minutes out there twice. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Patterson. Justice Yusri.
Thank you, Judge. For me, the number 4, the biggest thing for me was that it's right on the property line, and that there's no, I mean, it's right in the neighbor's face. I mean, when she's working in her garden, and there's no room there. So that's why I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Yusri. Justice Balls.
Thank you, Judge. I also went out to the area and walked the land. I know exactly where the house is by looking at that, and the house is just right off of that picture, so it is pretty close. And that's my issue, is how close it is to the property line, where it is within the floodplain, and how close it is to the road. I agree with Justice Patterson. You can do what you want with your land, and I encourage that, but for me, I'm going to support 6.2. Thank you, Judge.
Justice Pauls, thanks. Justice Bowman?
Thank you, Judge. You know, I went out and walked over the property, and I've talked to some of the neighbors. And, you know, I was concerned enough about this that I came to a meeting of the Planning Commission to ask specific questions about this project. And I found in talking to them that some of them really struggled with voting and approving this property. And so, you know, they're the people that work with it more frequently. And, you know, it is very difficult for me to say no to somebody's bought property and disallowing what they want to do with it. But I think the fact that this property was zoned residential agriculture to begin with, and they knew that going in, and that this process would have to take place, and then the proximity to it, I think elements out of 4, 5, and 6 all do apply in this case. And so I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Justice Bowman, thank you. Justice Eckley.
I have a question, Mr. Judge, if I may ask our attorney. Do we all have to go on record now as saying what we do support, or is it when we vote for it during the voting process?
You can do it when you vote. I mean, you don't have to do it, you don't have to do it right now, but you can do it when you vote. I mean,
Okay.
my point was, as long as a record is made, and it doesn't mean everybody has to go on record, but as long as we have a majority of people making
It
a
will
record.
be by roll call vote.
It'll be a
and that
roll call
way-
vote, and you can
Okay,
state
then
it
I'd
that
like to call the question. Thank you.
What's the question? Go ahead.
We have to have public comment first. And so the way that's done is that it's 10 minutes in favor of passage of 6.2, which is the ordinance denying the conditional use, and then there will be 10 minutes allowed for those that oppose the passage of 6.2, so opposing the passage of the ordinance that denies the CUP, sorry. So we'll start with those in favor. If anybody wants to speak, you're not obligated to. In support, and I'll start the timer. The people that are supporting the denial.
Good evening.
Good evening, thank you. My name's Kevin King, and my property is to the east. You can't see it, of the proposed CUP, about 250 feet away, right behind the McDaniels. Most all of the reasons that I oppose have been spoken already, but I'll go ahead and briefly give you my primary. It's the noise. I bought my property, approximately 18 acres, and built my home in 2002, and it was to get away from the city noise. And I'm a property rights guy and a business guy, and I appreciate people wanting to do what they will with their property and own a business. But that said, I don't want to have to listen to their music, and I will. There's no way you can keep that many people and that kind of music quiet. Same thing, proximity to neighbors. The road is, it's been said that it's adequate, but it's also a bit dangerous if you have that many people going up and down the road. I appreciate you guys coming out and taking a look at the property and seeing it firsthand, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Any other comments? Good evening.
I'm Nancy Halfliger. You have to excuse my voice today. My asthma's kicking up. And that's another issue with me, is the dust, because I do have asthma. And the noise, all of this has been stated, but the quiet, like Miss Madison said, that's the reason we bought that property. Because we can sit on the back porch and we listen to the birds and the crickets. We don't listen to somebody else's music or traffic noises, or that's the reason we bought out there. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Candace Wilson. We own the farm as you enter on the south side. So my parents-in-law bought the farm in 1971, and we've seen much change. We were looking through pictures as my father-in-law just passed a couple of weeks ago, and looking at pictures of when he personally paid for the paving, because at that time the county would pave it if you would come up with the money. And so my father-in-law, Bob Wilson, moved his fences all back, and we had it paved as far as we own the property to there, to where the pavement is. So it was a very different place when we moved there in 1978. We raised 2 children there, and 2 of our grandchildren were started there. They're now in Africa. But when my children were young on that road, it was so quiet that they raised market lambs and showed at the county fair. And we walked those lambs up and down the road. It was so tame there that we could turn the lambs loose and they would run to the barn for extra exercise and go in without any problem. Our kids learned to ride their bikes on the road. By the time our grandkids were there, my daughter-in-law worked very hard with the county and the sheriff's department to get the speed limit sign up. She kept the little child thing out there to warn you that children were playing, because the traffic is so, they speed up and down the road. They go very fast. Then they hit that gravel road, and I feel so sorry for the family right there, because they hit it going very fast, and then the dust is just, my husband and I walk the pavement part. We don't walk on the dirt road part. But when we see a car coming, we turn and go the other way because the dust is going to be so bad. A few little concerns that I had. 11 o'clock is their closing time, but again, 3 women may be policing that. Not every wedding would be in the afternoon only. It would go, and if you rented it and it was a price for one day, you're going to stay till 11 and then come out then. I think it would take more policing with the sheriff's department. I am concerned with opening the river up to, because right now the river is mostly privately owned properties. So if you open it up, that people find that it's a good way to get down to the river, and then you have not only the littering of the river and the erosion and stuff of being on the river, but you also have vandalism. You have problems in the dark down on the river. That's a concern of mine. The car lights, the dust, the alcohol, and then, well, it reminds me of, we all did know there was an airport there. We all knew that there was a train, but that's even country sounds because we're used to it. But if you moved to the country from the city and you complained about the smell, you knew it was there already. So you moved to the country, so you really shouldn't complain about the smell. Well, we're in the country, and they know that it is country and that we do want the quiet. So bringing the noises in is kind of the opposite. So I would encourage you to vote against it, or to deny it.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Good evening.
Hello. My name is Brad Voles. I am not a neighbor. I am friends of a couple of the neighbors and got involved because I heard what was going on. And first of all, I appreciate that it seems like there's due process here and that all sides were heard, and maybe a learning opportunity for everybody. Mostly what I take out of it is it certainly seems like there's a clear, heavier weight against this project, which I guess would be for your 6.2. And hopefully the learning that could come out of it is the county and city could develop some standards for future opportunities, so this kind of a disharmony might be avoided. And we set some guidelines for especially a new and sort of hybrid use of an event center. And it would seem like a much bigger property and much wider setbacks would be appropriate for a venue like this. Thank you.
Thank you. 2 minutes left. Anybody else in support of 6.2? All right, we'll go ahead and have comments on the against 6.2. Okay. You're good. All right. Thank you, President. All right, we'll go ahead. Looking for the motion? There's been motion, there's been second. All right. Go, Carly, roll call.
Harvey Bowman,
Justice Balls, I'm sorry.
Are we voting on to call the question, or are we voting on the ordinance? Voting
On the
Okay, thank you.
To deny the conditional use.
Okay, a yes is to deny.
That's
Okay,
correct.
Gotcha, thank you.
Justice Keeklight, there, we're ready to do the vote.
Harvey Bowman, Robert Dennis, Lisa Ecke,
Yes, based on 4, 5, 6, and 7.
Ann Harbison,
Yes.
Joe
Based
Kickler.
on roads are not adequate, it's not compatible. 5, disrupts the neighborhood. I think that's enough, thank you.
Joe Kickler,
No. While the development is unfortunately and obviously unique in the zoning of the area and in the neighborhood, I do not feel comfortable going against the staff recommendation that is that the only remaining concern is a compatibility concern, which they've referred to the board, to this quorum court. And I trust the staff recommendation that the development will meet the technical requirements which enable the safety of the development. And concerning the compatibility, I trust the staff recommendation that it will not be incompatible with the lifestyle of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Roddy Lloyd, Tom Lundstrom, Eva Madison, Sue Madison, Joel Maxwell, Joe Patterson, Butch Pond, Bill Ussery, Daniel Balls. It's been adopted.
It has been adopted, ordinance 6.2, and so it's been denied. You got a comment? Thank you guys all for coming out this evening. Appreciate you. There's been a movement.